there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
SDSM, Dewey, and the left in general in Macedonia were on favorable terms with the U.S. government when they were in power. Now that Vumero is in power, it too is on favorable terms with the U.S. government, and yet the Macedonian left is furious, with several of their former officials complaining about the relationship and cooperation, and some lefty media in Macedonia even calling for the death of President Trump and more. Shameful. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department under Marco Rubio has canceled 83% of USAID's programs. Will any of those in Macedonia survive? And Ali Ahmeti and his Dewey party, or what's left of it, continue in their attempts to stir up trouble, and this time by arguing that local elections currently scheduled for the fall should be canceled, and more. We'll discuss all of this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Jason Miko coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Čelimanov in Skopje, Macedonia.
Cvetin, good talking to you. It's been about a month, I think.
It was, I think, like 10 years in real time, in events, if we count the passage of time by the events happening in a measurable unit of time. It was at least 10 years.
In the world, I mean, what is the saying? And I can't remember the attribution. There are some
years that nothing happens, and then there are weeks when years happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I think yes, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You can't do it. It's just too much going on.
Fire hose of American champagne. not French. We can't.
Well, we can't call it champagne. America can't produce champagne by.
You can do whatever you want under Trump. It's yours.
Hey, look, I'm going to be honest with you. The price of eggs on January 19, when Joe Biden was president, 18 eggs here at my local grocery store were 589 dinars, the equivalent. And on January 21st, the first full day of Donald Trump, they were still 589 dinars.
No, I'm just looking at some charts that it's dropping faster than the stock market and the Bitcoin.
Well, I don't know. Not here. I'll be honest with you. And of course, this has to do with avian bird flu, et cetera. It has nothing to do with Biden or Trump or anything else. But anyway, everybody seems to use it as a stand-in. So, but yes, yeah, drink. Oh yes. Oh, I know where we're going. Yeah, fire hose, champagne. You can call it whatever you want. Well, yeah. Again, eggs were still 589 dinars when it was the Gulf of Mexico, and there's still 589 dinars when it's the Gulf of America. So, anyway, this is episode 187, and we're recording this on March the 13th. So a few days before the Ides of March, before St. Patrick's Day, and I guess those are the two holidays limited to March. But yes, this is the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, so we talk about things in Macedonia. But again, going back to what we just said a few minutes ago, events. Who was the British Prime Minister who, when he was asked a question, he said, "How will your administration? What will drive your administration?" And he said, "Events, dear boy, events." So
yeah,
I can't remember. This is in the 50s, I think, 60s or 50s, but yeah. So yes, events. So let's start at the top here on the monologue. Obviously, the Vumero government is very close to members of the Trump administration, and that's all well and good. And but the left is really complaining. I mean, I saw Stevo Pentorovsky, who I thought had the sense to be a little more diplomatic.
No, he can't.
No? Okay, speaking out.
He always does this.
Yeah. So it's, and of course, the accusation is thrown back at them. Well, you guys were close to the Biden administration and Soros and everybody else, and you didn't tell us anything about what was going on. Yeah. But what troubles me even more is this, I mentioned here, some in the Macedonian media, the leftosphere, calling for the death of President Trump. That, of course, since it's public information, we can, Sasha Ordanovsky, and called for the death of President Trump, which is, I would think the U.S. Embassy would be interested in having a conversation with him.
They've been really hit by everything that's happening. They were really shaken by they were thinking they'll just ride the second Trump term like the first Trump term, that nothing is going to happen, that they will just, a bunch of advisors will bamboozle Trump again, and, they'll give him to sign things he doesn't read. Is it Macedonia? Is it Moldova? Who cares? They kept saying...
North Mauritania.
Yeah. They kept saying like, oh, he changed the name. It was Trump actually who renamed Macedonia, who did the color revolution because it, finished formally under his term. But then when we saw him, like on the second day, it was already clear that no, it's not going to happen. It's not that Trump 2.0 is much different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And especially when the USAID thing happened, like they're all living on both USAID money and on the clout and protection given to them by the USAID embassy in the past, both the Albanians and the SDSM officials, and especially the Skopje diplomatic faction, and the myriad of NGOs and media outlets who the US embassy created and funded over the decades. And now they're shocked. So specifically, Jordanovsky would go on these long, hours-long rants on Infomax, which used to be great guys, and then they switched sides to the left, and they're like attacking Mickoski on everything he does with relation to the U.S., like his frequent visits. So he was in the U.S. for the NATO summit, for the Trump inauguration, and then again for CPAC as a featured speaker. And he would go, he would do like, he would go to the usual suspects. So he would go to SAIS, he would meet with Edward Joseph and Daniel Server, and he would meet with Philip Ricker there. So like it's not all MAGA, it's not all Trump. On the contrary, he would meet the other side as well. He went to the Atlantic Council, which, like CIA Central, Deep State Central at the moment. And but then he would go to CPAC, he would meet, noticeably meet Trump people, and then, he would meet people before they became something. So he met with Dan Bongino, and like weeks later he's named
Deputy head of the FBI.
Director. Yeah. And potentially playing a major role in what we expect will be coming investigations into the USAID funding, because we have a minister of the US government telling us, Elon Musk, not just any minister, telling us that it was a criminal organization operating in our midst. So there has to be investigations. I mean, I don't see how this can go without like tax and money laundering investigations. So this is obviously, much of this was done by Rumble owner Chris Pavlovsky, who would come to Macedonia, invite Mickoski over, like they hit it off well, and these are, he would introduce him to people from his entourage who are, not just accidental people. Right. So it's been a massive show of, strength with the new administration from Mickoski. And these guys like Jordanovsky, they got extremely nervous, so they would go for hours on end. They would live stream or they would just go live to Mickoski's Instagram and say, okay, now, well, look, he's sitting so far above, he's not invited to the rotunda. So now he's sitting in the Capital One arena, but it's very high up. He was in the VIP section with the RNC chairman, who then Trump went on to thank personally during his speech, standing ovation for the guy. And so on CPAC, he was actually a speaker, and he was opening up issues such as American natural gas investments, investments in hydropower, and even the Chinese railroad, the railroad that will ship Chinese goods through the Balkans, done with Hungary and Austria and Greece and Serbia. He was even pitching this as a potentially US project, not necessarily one that will benefit China. So, practical things, actual things we could do. And these guys who so long had monopoly on connections and ties with the US administration, they were petrified. And Ordanovsky made this comment that, well, look what he's doing. He's putting us on the table, potential new Yalta coming. But then, haha, what happened shortly after Yalta? Haha, one of the main, one of the big three there. He then, what happened to him? Roosevelt died, obviously. Mm-hmm. So maybe we get rid of Trump sooner rather than later. So this was his comment. And I think just for shiz and giggles, Vomero said, hey, you've been accusing us so long of being a pro-Russian, anti-American faction. Mm. Well, now we have the actual spokesman of SDSM, like high-ranking, trusted, listened to public commentator in their midst, calling for the death of the US president and calling him a neo-Nazi and... in 3 hours, if we keep this on for 3 hours, if we're in a different state of mind the way they are, God knows what we will end up saying for anybody.
Right.
We say a lot of stuff in half an hour. So yeah, Vomero has been saying, okay, hey guys, why are you so nervous? Why are you attacking our strategic partner? So it's a fun exercise on part of Vomero to turn the tables on the left, but it's also a major paradigm shift what Mitskovsky called the new normal.
Right. Which is opposed to the, if you watch the State of the Union, of course, it was a joint address to Congress of President Trump 2 weeks ago, and I can't remember the member of Congress, Democrat, obviously, who had a sign. She stood in the aisle that you have to. Members of Congress will stand in the aisle where the president walks down and his cabinet walks down. They'll stand there for hours to get that spot. And if you remember Elliot Engel, the late Elliot Engel used to be there every single time. He was a good friend.
Oh yeah, glad
Kosovo and the Albania. Yeah, he had the Peter Sellers. He looked like Inspector Clouseau when Peter Sellers played Inspector Clouseau. He would stand there for hours. Anyway, this member of Congress had a sign on just a small piece of paper that said, "Is this normal?" So, and she got roundly ridiculed for that. I mean, is it normal? Well, I don't know. It's been this way for a long time. Trump has been a part of our lives, and when I say our, I mean the planet, for the past 10 years since he came down the escalator in 2015, and he's barring accident, death, impeachment. He's not going to get impeached in the first 2 years at least. He's going to be around for a much while longer. So in a way, it is the new normal, whether you like it or not. So that's just kind of the way it is. But and we all know what Trump is like and his personality and his antics and the way he operates and things like that. And that's just kind of the way it is. So you kind of have to get used to it and figure out how to deal with it. Now, having said what you just said about the relationship, etc. It's the proper place for the investigations into USAID and abuse of taxpayer money, etc., is with Congress, because under our system of government, Congress is the body that appropriates money and has oversight over the money, including the executive. We have three branches of the government: executive, legislative, judicial. So, and in the way, believe it or not, this may come as a shock to some of our listeners, but the supreme branch of the U.S. government amongst the three is actually Congress. It is not the presidency.
Yep.
But over the past 50 years, Congress has given its power voluntarily up to the presidency, no matter who's in power, and the presidency has willingly taken that power and run with it. I mean, we don't have a monarch, believe it or not, and we don't have a parliamentary system where the party in power gets to do everything they want. So the founders were ingenious in creating this tension between the various branches of Congress, because they felt that the best way to govern is to go really slow and grind it out and to come to compromise and things like that. Now I'm giving a lesson in history and civics here.
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to what I said, so it's the proper role of the Congress to do these investigations, even if Musk, whatever, doesn't matter what he says. So let's see where that's go. Let's hope that goes there. on the issue of, and this would be a nice segue into the State Department and so 83% of USAID's programs canceled. Now there's two parts to this, I think, Svet, and you can, let's delve into this a little bit more. So number one, so all of the programs that we've complained about over all these years in our podcasts and my writings and things like that, whether it's translating Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals into Macedonian, whether it's the gay billboards, whether it's, the Boy Scout incident, all of these things. These are all going to be canceled. I don't know, and it may be too early to figure out if of those 17% that do survive, if any of those are related to Macedonia. Maybe it's some cultural preservation stuff. I got no problem with that. USAID programs that literally feed people, I got no problem with that. It's all this other stuff that we've rightly, I think, complained about. Now, the other side of this, though, is for years we have talked about on this podcast and privately and offline and with other friends, etc., the need to create center-right think tanks in Macedonia to counter the left. And we've often talked about, okay, well, USAID is funding, the lefties, can't they fund the right? Well, now USAID is not going to fund anybody. So we still need these center-right think tanks in Macedonia, whether it's a duplication of the Heritage Foundation or the American Enterprise Institute or, any of these. Where is, we need to think about a strategy for that.
I mean, listen, this is the greatest show on earth. Everybody's following it, regardless whether they're paid by USAID or not.
Right.
People, I've known people, and I'm one of them maybe, who has begun emulating American talking points and policies and actually publicly defending them without even being paid for this by USAID, and often in opposition to the embassy, not with their approval. So it's not something that has to go through the government. It can go through private individuals. I mean, it's actually, you can just declare, I like this guy, I'm supportive of this guy, and you get even maybe some kind of like a clout. You get invited to shows, you get to, you just listen to and share his content, and then just people listen to the thinking that American conservatism is sharing, and some of it rubs off on people, and they understand why should we pay for these organizations? Why shouldn't we allow the free market to flourish? But also, now the issues of nation state and identity. We don't obviously need the US to tell us these things. We have been discussing this by ourselves a lot. Now it's just like, for a change, this kind of thinking might actually come from the U.S. Embassy with its approval, and this would be by now we've all known that we've been accustomed to that everything that comes from the embassy that comes with the stamp of USAID politically is to the left. It's destructive to the traditional family, to the nation state, to sound economics, to reason, to basic biology. I mean, unfortunately, the U.S. foreign policy machinery has turned into an extremely radical outfit, lavishly funded, and has done tremendous damage across the world. So I'd rather everything is cut, not just 83%. And I imagine what remains will be vaccines and food for Africa. I doubt that they would be funding like political programs in Macedonia, in a middle-income European country, which makes absolutely zero sense.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that this will be uprooted, and then, if there is then like a robust competition between commentators, public, talking heads, aping American talking points, at least it will be done like on a level playing field without one side being funded by the left, by the embassy and USAID, and then taken to the US for trainings and given money for color revolution programs, for regime change operations, and then attacking the other side. You saw this Congress debate. They even evoked like these articles that came out in OCCRP and Politico in 2017 when Heritage was actually saying that in the first Trump term that what Trump is doing is crazy. I mean, what the U.S. embassy here is doing is crazy, calling on Trump to remove the ambassador. And they had us attacked that we are Russian puppets.
Right.
I had a political journalist call me for a full hour. Didn't care anything. I would tell him like USAID, corruption, like money laundering, like unfair political bias ties. No, do you know Russians? Do you speak Russian? Have you been to Russia?
Seriously. Wow.
Literally, like
Yeah.
full hour. I didn't even give him like the courtesy. Okay, just do it. Call me on Viber. This is gonna cost you like $1,000. No.
Yeah.
Okay. If this is how it's gonna go, fine. At least you pay for this. With USAID money, because it turns out Politico was also funded by USAID. He only quoted me in one sentence where I said, okay, maybe Russia is trying to, sees what you guys are doing in my country, and is saying, okay, America is zigging, so we better zag, and we make a few statements in support of the other side, the side that US is attacking. And this is the only line that was quoted. But they tried to make the Heritage Foundation look like a Russian outfit. So they were extremely manipulative. They were extremely dishonest and lying bastards. And it all needs to go. In my mind, best, burn it all down, and then we'll see what happens afterwards.
Right. No, I get you. And on the Russia thing, I always like quoting, in the run up to the so-called referendum in September of 2018 on the so-called name change. You had Matis, Merkel, and Matis, Merkel, and May, all come in that month, and talking about interference in elections, and say you got to vote for this. And on the day that Matis came in, Prime Minister Zaev at the time was asked, "Is there Russian influence?" And Matis came in and said, "There's Russian influence here." And Zaev was asked the question, "Is there Russian influence here?" And he said, "No." So that's that's citizen saying there's no Russian influence here. Maybe there's a little bit on the fringe. I mean, my goodness, the Russians, like the Americans, like the Chinese, have their, are involved in some way everywhere. And that's just kind of the nature of being a global player.
No, but we kept saying the U.S. is going to generate this because it's attacking us relentlessly without giving any, always favoring the Albanians over the Macedonians, and the deracinated, ruthless Macedonian left, against the Macedonian right to be two regime change operations in 2000, 2001 and 2015, 2017 with massive arrests following these regime change operations. So, But there is so much you can take.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I completely get it. I get it. But again, going back to my point earlier, that I would like to see, and we said we'd like to see, center-right think tanks emerge in Macedonia, and those are going to have to be paid for either by the public in Macedonia. They're going to have to contribute to nonprofits that do this, or the money's going to have to come from somewhere. We have, in the Tocquevillian way, Alexis de Tocqueville, the French aristocrat that came here in the 1830s, talked about the spirit of Americans, how they just would not wait for the government to get involved. They just go and do it on their own and solve problems. This is where that comes from, this idea of, we've got, I know NGOs in Macedonia have a bad name, understandably, but they shouldn't. To be honest, and we can let's to take the odor, shall we say, of the name, the name NGO. Let's just call them nonprofits. I mean, we got I give monthly money to nonprofits here, like for instance the Gospel Rescue Mission. They literally help homeless men, women, and children. They do wonderful work. They're not political. They're Christian based, which is even better. That's technically it's an NGO, it's a nonprofit. Groups like that, but those groups survive and thrive and fill gaps where government cannot be involved or should not be involved, because Americans donate willingly to these groups. And I know that I think after almost 30 years in Macedonia, I know the Macedonian mindset that if you give to an NGO, if you give to a nonprofit, the thought in Macedonia is, well, the leaders of this nonprofit are just going to take the money for themselves. And that's something that has to be overcome, and it's not going to be overcome in a generation, maybe 2 generations, maybe 3 generations. So my point being, going back to my point, that for center-right think tanks or NGOs or nonprofits, whatever you want to call them, to start growing in Macedonia, somebody's got to fund them. So where that money's going to come from, I don't know, but that's something that I think we're both committed to, and others are as well, because there's a need for them. I think there's a need for nonprofits in Macedonia, NGOs, to start educating young people, children, start with children, about what is the proper role of government, what is the proper role of the citizen. What are the citizen has rights, but the citizen also has responsibilities. What is a free market economy? What does it do? Why is it good? Why is it the best source of creating prosperity and wealth in a country as opposed to a command economy, which is what our friends on the left want to do? All of these things, this is stuff that has to be inculcated in the young. So for the future success of Macedonia. So. Anyway, I'll get off.
Yeah, a lot of work, but let's first stop the
stop the
poison in
cancer.
people's minds.
Cut the cancer out.
Yeah. Afterwards, we'll see what.
Speaking of cancer, this is a nice segue to Ali Ahmeti,
nice.
and his Dewey party. So we got local elections coming up in the fall. I don't know if they've actually been scheduled or not, but.
It's too early. Sometime automatically scheduled, I guess.
So Ali Ahmeti and various members of his party are calling for the cancellation of local elections. Basically, correct me if I'm wrong, under the idea that I think their broad theme is that Albanians are disrespected, which, let's just say that's true. It's not a crime. It's not against the law. Maybe it's bad manners. It's also a perception for them. From their side, perception that they're being disrespected. It's kind of like, people that think they have a right not to be offended. Sorry. So this is his broad message and headline. I don't think it's going to get any purchase with the public there or even the internationals there. They're not going to listen to him if he says we're being disrespected. But point is, he's trying to stir up trouble again. What else can we expect from them? I mean, vis-a-vis, and especially vis-a-vis Vlin, which is a member of the government.
So they first had some success in the first round of protests in November over the Albanian Flag Day. And Dewey immediately said, okay, we'll follow up on this. All the people on the left were super excited. They thought, great, we are making this an ethnic issue, and then the US will have to get involved, the old Balkan diplomatic hands will have to get involved, blah, blah, blah. Then they started, Dewey was using members of the Constitutional Court, which they have elected, their people, they are an SDSM, to begin to challenge issues that are obviously due to be challenged, like hiring Albanians over Macedonians in the public sector. But obviously the timing was meant to say that, look, even though it's our judges doing this, it's actually the government doing this, and therefore VMRO and the new Albanian coalition partner Vlin is at fault, so you join us. And Dewey started doing protests over the first of these issues, the hiring of Albanians. But then the US Embassy intervened and put Artan Grubi on the blacklist, and this completely deflated their protests.
Oh, happy day.
That was the start of the paradigm change. And now their next big idea is that they show that they control the Albanian villages. So they said, we'll actually not participate, we'll stop the local elections from happening in the Albanian areas because Albanian rights are undermined, which would be something like a revolt. VMRO responded immediately or the police and the government, filing charges against the biggest financier of Dewey, Pucko Petrol, Jahoski, their member of parliament, Ismail Jahoski, charged his son, a businessman who sided with him, basically was used as a front face to, during the major energy crisis after the war in Ukraine started, these guys were given 160 plus million euros to purchase oil to be burned at the Negotino coal plant and also sprinkled in the Bitola coal plant, which burns coal, but to improve the caloric value of the coal. And Negotino burns oil. Negotino is an oil plant to produce electricity. Since regional prices were so high, we were going bankrupt just by importing electricity. And these guys, to make a bit more money, they allegedly purchased oil which is chemically, causes cancer, contains pollutants. It was not refined properly. So the sellers were, if not giving it away very cheaply. Mm-hmm. So these guys were all now charged. Dewey pulled their strings to get their member of parliament's son out of detention. So he's in house arrest, which is adding even more power to Mickovsky's calls that the judiciary has to be reformed immediately. Mm-hmm. But now with their main financier out of the picture and their presumed next leader of the party fleeing the country, Artan Grubi, Dewey are now in a horrible position. So they will lose Tetovo, Gostivar, Shire for sure, the big free urban districts that are majority Albanian, because Vëmëra will side with Vlen, will give the Macedonian votes to Vlen, even if Vlen is falling short behind Dewey. And the way things are going, they might not even be falling behind at all or that much. Mm. And this will be a disaster for Dewey. They can only count, maybe hope to win smaller districts. And even some of their officials who stand a chance to win in the local elections, they said, no, we're not boycotting, we're actually running. So this is what usually happens. Like Zaev was once, SDSM were planning to boycott elections, and local elections, and Zaev turned against Crvenkovski because he had a good chance to win in Strumica. And he says, I'm not losing my mayoralship just for your political gambit. So basically they're getting even more disunited because of the call for boycott, and they just lost their main source of funding. Mm. So it's all downhill from here for Dewey, and it's looking very, very, very bleak for them. Also for SDSM, because then they don't have anybody to tie up with.
Yeah, it's a slow demise for Dewey. I'm reminded of the Hemingway quote. I can't remember the book or the character, but the quote is, "How did you go bankrupt? Gradually, and then suddenly." So yeah. So this might be the last gasp of Ali Ahmeti and his band of warmongers. And for citizen, I mean, again, I go back to this. I feel like a child banging his spoon on his high chair because I keep repeating this over and over again. That institutionally, Syriza and Vëmëro, have been around a long time, and I think will be around a long time because, like them or hate them, like their ideologies and agendas or hate their ideologies and agendas, they do have an ideology and an agenda. I tend to agree more with Vëmëro than Syriza. Not tend to, I do. Whereas the Albanian parties, have always never really had an agenda. It's just about what can you give us. Yeah. They're cult of personality. Sure. So, and the same thing is for Vlen. I'd be happily surprised if they actually had a ideology that talked about the prosperity of all Macedonians, no matter what the ethnicity, and the proper ordering and flourishing of society. But I'm not going to hold my breath waiting on that. So that's why what you said about Syriza, about their slow decline. Maybe there's going to be ups and downs for any party in any country, in any long-term institutional party that's been around a long time. So I suspect they'll come back at some point. And again, this is the warning for Vëmëro, even though they've only been in power now for coming up on a year this spring, I think. You can't be complacent. Just like the Republicans here, if we don't get this economy turned around in 2 years, the Democrats are going to take the House at least. So it calls for vigilance. That's what I'm saying. So,
yeah, for sure.
Got to be careful about these things. So,
I mean, Mickoski is doing well. He went to, he just scored like major investment from Turkey to build like gas power plants and you know, reduce price of heating.
Which is good, although I'm a little bit wary about the caliphate coming back through Turkey.
Well, I have to buy it somewhere. We can't buy Russian,
Right,
So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Damn it! No, he's pitching this as an American investment. Actually,
Oh, okay.
I was actually just listening to the House House Arms Control Committee because Jim O'Brien was there, and a great member of Congress was actually shouting at Jim O'Brien at one point.
Jim O'Brien being the State Department official for our listeners that may not keep track of this.
Such a weasel. It was, and before the whole discussion was cut short because the Republican guy called the transgender.
Oh, that was the
guy,
committee, Tim McBride.
Yeah,
who goes by the name Sarah.
This is exactly
Right.
the same hearing.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know they're saying, listen, we have to build like gas pipeline either from Croatia, Bosnia to Serbia or Greece, Macedonia to Serbia, and you know they're the last big outpost of Russian gas. Of course, Slovakia, Hungary as well. We'll see what the price will be, but we are, you know, discussing becoming like putting ourselves on the supply line. He has the Hungarian money, which you know, the billion from Hungary, and Mickoski was just in Hungary for a meeting of the two governments. So you know, this is money that will be trickling down as we lose some jobs in the car sector because the German engine is sputtering.
No pun intended.
Yeah, but if he gets some kind of like American investments in, he was pitching Chibrin and Galište at CPEC, the two large hydro plants. So you know, this could all be good. Just like general, I mean, we had a great investment year for foreign direct investments, including some wind and solar coming in. There are no more people to be hired here. Everybody is working, everybody who wants to work or can work. So that's it. I mean, that's what you can do in this environment before hopefully peace reigns and maybe energy prices go down and I don't know what else could happen, like to change the economic picture. But it's solid.
Yeah.
In general, everything is, we're removing the unfair US interference in our politics with helping the left and the Albanians and competently implementing infrastructure projects, which VMRO has always done and SDSM could never do, and maybe bring some foreign investments. So that's the most people can hope for, I guess.
Good. Well, that's okay. That's a good way to end on a hopeful note for once, instead of crushing morosity. So, all right, good. Yeah, let's leave it at that for now. And I have to get to the office because it's still morning here and afternoon there, and you need to get home. All right, that's a good wrap. Let's. We're still in the first 100 days. I know it's an arbitrary number. I don't know where it came from, but it's kind of stupid. But this is the measurement that we. You know, every country seems to give its new government the first 100 days. We're at about day 50, right in the middle. End of April, I think, will be the 100th. But we'll have another podcast here maybe in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and see where we are, and just keep measuring it, you know, as we go forward.
Yeah, it's so far. I mean, so far great.
So far, so good.
Great. I mean, if we keep saying, if we had this Trump in 2017, if we had like 10% of this Trump in 2017. This country would have been much, much better now.
Right. All right. That's a wrap. Great talking to you, Svet.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Take care.
Take care.